So I heard some news about Mozilla lately, Bigpod.
Really?
Yeah, apparently they don't need to advocate anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then in the meantime, the EU Finance Committee has finally decided that they need to make some more money from Apple this time around. And ARM has decided to cancel Qualcomm like it's 2018 all over again.
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome to No Tucks Allowed. I am your wonderful host, Josh. And with me today, I have the almost disappointing but still wonderful Bigpod. How's it going today?
Doing great. How are you?
Well, not too bad. I had some struggles with some distros I would like to talk about later, but we got some big news here.
Really?
And yeah. The Mozilla Foundation just laid off 30% of its staff. And most of it coming from the advocacy division. Now, if say you don't watch like the Linux YouTube space, Mozilla is a great company until like they get too deep in their advocacy, because this is the department where it's just that came out and said that yes, we should censor people, or talking about like software rights and stuff like that. And they've stepped on a lot of political topics in the past, and it has definitely drawn like the ire of some YouTubers that tend to talk about software projects, and it's kind of like given Mozilla a bit of a bad name at times. But it is kind of sad to see this department go at the same time too, because this was the department that would go out and talk about like your personal privacy in respects to the web browser and so on. So I hope that they can continue to some aspect of talking about that, because that is important that we need to talk about that. But it does have me somewhat concerned. It's also not the first time that Mozilla's had to lay some people off this year, too.
Really?
This is by far the biggest layoff that they've had in a hot minute or so.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, Big Pod. I know you're not a Firefox user yourself.
Yeah.
But as somebody that probably has used Firefox in the past and probably loved it in the past, how bad do you see this?
Since it wasn't that much on development side, that might not be such an impact, but if this trend continues, this could be bad for the browser market, because in reality there are only two competitors, Chromium and Firefox. Yes, there is Safari, but who cares about Safari?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Apple just complains to a loud void. That's really, and Chromium decides to set the standard and then and then tries to force everybody to go along with it. And Mozilla is just that kid screaming in the corner, going like, "Hey, we shouldn't do that thing because this, or maybe we should do this thing instead of that."
Well, up until now, based on what I know, Chromium has been playing pretty correctly. They set the standards, send them to the right authorities, and authorities accepted or not accepted them. They haven't implemented much where it was like, this has to be like that, and we're not changing. It was always, at least to my knowledge, it was always pretty correct dealings. But who knows what would happen if they were the only main player in the game.
That's true, because once they're like the only main player left, it's just like, what's Chromium going to care about? Apple?
Yeah.
Well, those people on macOS are installing Google Chrome anyway. If they know what a web browser even is to begin with.
Yeah.
So it's concerning.
Kind of.
And the article that we have linked is from OMG Ubuntu, because I like this group's work. I don't know if it's a single guy or if it's a group.
I believe it's Joey by himself.
Just Joey? Oh,
I believe
entirely
so.
possible.
I believe it's just Joey Snedon and nobody else.
Yeah, but anyways.
Well, to squash that, in the side menu he has send me news/tips and buy me a coffee. So it's probably just one guy then.
Yeah, possible. But anyways, he goes to touch on like some of the struggles that like even GNOME has had with funding. And he does mention that you can donate to GNOME, but he doesn't mention that you can donate to Mozilla. And I think that's kind of like a bad. That's kind of like setting a bad precedent for Joey, because Mozilla makes most of its money off of actual, or well, technically
Mozilla
makes
most of the
money
money from business deals like with Google.
Yes, but they file that as a donation.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a business deal. It is Google donating money to the Mozilla Foundation. That's how they file it. Because I believe that they're legitimately listed as a nonprofit charity.
Interesting.
I'll have to double check like their filings, but I believe that they are filed as a nonprofit. Might not be a charity, so it's a 501c something. Might not be a 501c3. Might be something else. In the United States, at least.
Yeah.
But these guys. I do want to make this clear. I am a supporter of the Mozilla Foundation. I do donate money to them almost yearly. I used to do it weekly. I used to throw $25 per week at Mozilla, but they don't have like automatic. They don't have like a subscription style thing that you can fill out. So I kind of got tired of just manually doing that after a while. I'm just like, I'll just send them $100 a year. Probably more than most people give them anyway. But yeah, and this it does just suck. But Joey goes on to mention that, and to quote, "It's tough out there unless you're an AI unicorn," which little joke right there.
Yeah, for those of you who do not know, unicorn in this case doesn't mean a unicorn, an animal, fake animal, or mythical animal. It means a startup unicorn. So that's a startup with $1 billion of valuation.
Yeah. Basically, you don't see Mozilla running around slamming AI and everything, even though they did say at one point that they were looking at making their own AI model. I haven't heard any progress on that lately. Maybe they decided to not go that direction.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much the Mozilla news.
Well, so Josh, how do you feel about EU Commission giving fines to a US company like Apple?
It's not the first time, because sometimes, like back in the past, it was a curiosity question that I had for myself. That the EU just tends to run a little short on the cash, so then they just find some excuse to sue like Microsoft or something like that, because they just need like $1 billion somehow. And then it kind of petered off for a little bit there, and now it looks like it's happening again.
So what we're referring to is that Apple is about to be the first company that will be fined under the EU's Digital Markets Act, DMA, because it will be given a somewhat huge penalty after it found that Apple's anti-steering practices harmed competition on the App Store. And this fine is actually following an almost $2 billion fine imposed on Apple in March, which came after Spotify complained to the EU Commission that Apple restricted developers' ability to point users to cheaper purchase options, something that is now also really illegal under DMA in EU.
Yeah, so Spotify came out and complained to Apple in
EU.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
Apple.
in the EU, saying that hey, Apple won't let us use our own payment system.
Yeah. So
and this is basically just like a whole other round of this.
Yeah. This time is for probably something a bit different, but we don't actually know how much the fine will be because under the DMA rules, companies can be charged up to their 10% of annual global revenue, and if they are a repeat offender, up to 20%. So, since EU's initial fine could add up to as much as 38 billion, according to our source.
Yeah. Now, if you don't know how much money $38 billion is, first of all, you're not going to be able to imagine it. Sorry, but that is probably equal to the defense budget of a smaller nation.
Yes, probably.
So it is not
and some smaller countries' GDP.
Yeah. Which that is not a small fine, and thankfully Apple, number 2 company in the world right now, they can probably afford it.
But this is not the only fine that Apple is facing in EU at this time, since Apple is also facing an investigation over whether it's undermining alternative app stores in the EU, and in September, EU won a fight in regards to unpaid taxes.
Of course, because unlike the US, Apple or the EU actually cares when these big massive corporations pay taxes.
So EU may make a major windfall in regards to money.
Yeah,
just from Apple.
Which hey, I'm all fine. I'm all fine for Apple spending money.
But if Google goes in the direction they're apparently going, I think DMA could be targeting them as well.
That's true. I haven't read the DMA too much myself, mostly because it's EU law.
Yeah, neither have I.
But typically the European Union, when they pass laws like this, they do have a bit of an impact on the technology sector, because the European Union being comprised of a lot of these first world nations, effectively like having a larger majority of market share in the technology space too.
It's basically entire Europe from Poland to basically to Netherlands.
Yeah. So,
except I believe, except I think Switzerland. That might be in EU as well. Might be thinking another organization.
Might be.
That they're not in.
I know that the United Kingdom is not in the EU anymore.
Yeah, they left EU for some reason. Yeah, Switzerland is not member state of European Union. So I wasn't just thinking of another group, the one starting with N, because they're not part of that group either.
Anyways, to move on, Bigpod. Were you around in 2018 when people were getting canceled left and right in popular media?
I was around, of course, but I managed to not look at it that much.
Okay, well, this situation is not nearly as ridiculous as that one because it turns out that Qualcomm has raised some issues with the ARM licensing, and ARM is just finally done with it. So, ARM has straight up issued to Qualcomm with a 60-day notice of cancellation for their chip design license. Basically, permission to make CPUs.
This could be bad. Really bad.
Yeah.
Not just, and like here we're thinking of, first thing we think of is the new Qualcomm laptops, right? The what are those called? The Copilot Plus laptops, the Surface laptop, the Windows ARM laptop, essentially. What am I waffling about?
Basically Windows on ARM.
Yes, but that's not all. What I'm holding here is one of my old phones. This one has a Qualcomm chip in it, an ARM chip.
Yeah.
This is also caught in that.
Yeah. Same with my phone. Has a Qualcomm Snapdragon in it.
Also, I am not that worried about it because I am, and so are you, holding a Samsung device.
Yeah.
They're just gonna switch to Exynos, their own chips.
Yeah, they probably will.
They are quite a bit crappier. There's a reason S23 Ultra and all the Ultras run the Snapdragon chips only, but they're not actually that bad. But this is actually will have huge impact on other companies because what else is out there in the ARM market for phones? I think only MediaTek.
I think Broadcom at one point had a phone chip as well.
Yeah. And
then I can't think of any others off the top of my head.
They sold to Western companies. I can think of anything else besides MediaTek. I don't know.
Either way, Qualcomm has, for the longest time, been like the name brand of ARM CPUs.
Yes,
basically,
they have been the brand.
Yeah, if
for mobile.
if you have been like any capacity of a nerd, when I say Snapdragon, you know that I'm talking about Qualcomm.
Yes.
Or if I say Qualcomm, you're probably thinking of Snapdragon.
Yeah, those two terms are synonymous to me, honestly.
Yeah. And it's been like an issue with ARM space because you have to like pay the ARM Corporation a license like this.
We actually reported on this previously, if you remember, that there was a chance this will happen.
Yeah,
and now it happened. And the reason
this
happened is because ARM bought Nuvia, I believe. Which was making a server chip for ARM, which actually was made by people who were at the time at Apple when they made the M1 chip. So they wanted to make a chip for wider markets. So they created their own company.
Yeah.
And, well, Qualcomm bought Nuvia. I believe it's called Nuvia. I might be wrong. And the patent, we don't know license whether it went to Qualcomm or not, and that's what is being at crux of the problem here. So and Qualcomm then geared towards those Nuvia chips towards the desktop, towards the Windows on ARM devices.
Yeah. Now, the reason why Qualcomm became such a big company behind this is because they were one of the first companies to pick up a license to produce ARM CPUs.
Yeah.
Now, my question for you, Bigpod, is: Will Qualcomm invest in RISC-V? and try to do the same thing.
Well, if they will have to do something. They will have we'll have to do something. They have an option of trying to buy Intel again. I don't think that will happen. Now, I think if they lose this fight, it will be the other way around, more likely. The other option they have is somehow getting back those patents, or those licenses. Or the option 3 is either invest in a new architecture, like RISC-V, the new existing one, or go ahead and make their own architecture, which I don't see them winning at all.
I think that's easier for them just to invest in RISC-V.
Yes, and RISC-V is fully open. Well, I just thought of something else, but I don't see that happening.
Well, actually,
them going after x86. Try to strike a deal with Intel for x86 license.
I could see that because we already have foundries set up for x86 CPUs. They do exist for RISC-V, just not at the same scale as x86.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, how much they can do in x86 space they couldn't do. They would still have to invest years upon years upon years of time.
Yeah, and that's a lot of engineering resources. Because you got to remember, I don't know. Well, first of all, I just want to clarify. I don't know too much about like CPU architectures.
Yeah, I know
but
a little bit.
ARM stands for. ARM is essentially a reduced instruction set.
Yeah.
That because they're more simpler purpose-built CPU style systems.
No. Reduced instruction set, so RISC. That's RISC. Reduced instruction set.
Well, ARM is an extension on top of that.
Yeah. No.
So
first, let's talk about. So, you have CISC chips and RISC chips. x86 is a CISC class chip, which means, or a CISC class architecture, which means instructions within that architecture are more complex. They do more ticks at the same time, while RISC instruction set, so like ARM, like RISC-V, they are far more broken down and simple. So within a single cycle, they do far less, which helps them, I guess, with power, but they have to, and they might not be as good at certain operations because they have to do more cycles to get the same thing done as CISC chip. That's the most, how to say this, most simplest explanation of difference between CISC and RISC architectures. But when you go down in granularity, there is a lot more complexity, because one of the things that is more prevalent in RISC world than CISC is that RISC chips are far more modular. In the case of, it's much easier to add instructions, which has been seen in ARM, which you may know. One of my criticisms of ARM is that you basically, every CPU you buy that is ARM, you need to have a new kernel for it, like completely new kernel, because basically every new chip requires new enablement. For example, I'm going to give a quick example. The Raspberry Pi board will not have the same kernel as the Qualcomm's Windows on ARM chips, or they can have the same kernel, but there will be twice the modules in there, essentially.
Yeah, which has been like the main reason as to why Linux itself was so slow to actually begin ARM adoption, because or at least mass adoption among ARM devices, because you could always find like a Linux kernel for the Raspberry Pi, a Linux kernel for like your Pine.
That's actually it. Like, that's the point. You need a Linux kernel for that device, a Linux kernel for that. Otherwise, like, you're gonna have a 20, 30 gig kernel if you want to enable all the devices.
Yeah.
So now, you have to be really, really specific at what we enable. It's horrible.
I do believe that newer directions for ARM CPUs in general is that they're coming up with like a generalized instruction set for like basic drivers.
Yes, there is a set of instructions that is part of ARM base ARM. But the problem is that no CPU is base ARM. All of them have additional instructions, which is then what causes so much difference in kernel modules per CPU, which causes this kind of change. So, for example, in the x86 world, you have an Intel enablement and an AMD enablement, and 3/4 of the stuff is the same because it is the same architecture, after all. And to top it all off, for each CPU, I believe you have to the compiler needs to have some sort of enablement as well, because it needs to be able to know which features this CPU has so it can compile for that CPU. But I could be wrong on that part. So, okay. Yes. ARM is something I don't like, but besides the fact that it has a horrible, because it was always more meant for IoT space, phone space, or embedded space, it has huge amount of problems with with using things like device trees instead of using using ACPI, which means
I don't want to deal with this right now.
That you do not your system, when you're building a kernel and building a grub, you need to have literal list of what components are in the machine instead of UEFI auto-detecting them. That's what slows the enablement of devices of ARM devices on Linux, because you need to actually own each device. It's not like, okay, I'm gonna buy one ARM CPU, one ARM, one Intel CPU, and that's gonna be it, and I'm gonna have the whole slew of devices. Nope, you need to have each and every device to enable any kind of good performance. Welcome to ARM. I don't see that happening not happening with RISC-V. I see it going exactly the same way, of every device having its own kernel, every CPU having its own kernel. I mean, and maybe if they go and enable ACPI as soon as possible, maybe we're gonna get at least dual enablement of ACPI and device trees, which will make much easier development of at least boot up sequences and kernels for us distro developers. So, what do you think, Josh?
This leads me to wonder if, like, maybe the monolithic kernel method that we've been going with on Linux, maybe if, like, the future of that might not necessarily be a thing when it comes down to, like, these ARM and RISC systems hitting popularity. So
problem is, with the kernel stuff, you're gonna need some basic enablement for your kernel. For the ARM CPU, you're gonna need basic enablement in the kernel. But yes, I do believe that something to the level of how Windows, you install driver, which you install it normally, but you don't need all the drivers built into the kernel. That's the way forward for Linux as well. And possibly going so far as Windows goes, where you don't need to even have the exact version of the driver. Because that's in my opinion, is a big problem for Linux kernel. Where if you have 6.13 kernel, you need to have a build for 6.13 kernel of, let's say, v4L2 loopback kernel module. If you don't, it won't work. That's a big problem, in my opinion.
Which I think Linus has also mentioned in the past that is a problem. That's why he doesn't appreciate the way that some people develop like these kernel modules for Linux, where they're like doing a hard version check on a version number for Linux.
Yeah.
And he's talked about in the past how he had to do an update to the Linux kernel to roll back the advertised version number on the kernel to get other things working before or something crazy like that he had to do.
Wow, we need to get those people to stop doing that, because we need better support out of the box. It's better user experience out of the box. And if we can do that, then we have good things coming for Linux. So, Joshua, do we have anything else to talk about?
We can talk about my distro hopping journey in the last 72 hours.
Go ahead. I want to hear that.
Yeah.
You mentioned it a little bit in pre-show, so I know it must be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Bigpod.
Yeah.
I had a hardware failure just last week.
Really?
And it set me on a journey because, I had just installed this hot, new, fresh installation of my favorite operating system of Gen 2 Linux. I'm just addicted. I can't get away from it. I set up my ButterFS subvolumes. I set everything up properly as far as I could tell. Nothing different from like what you guys might have seen from like my live streams of distro hacking.
If you want to see some more distro hacking, go subscribe to him.
Yeah.
Over there, I think.
Yeah, eventually.
Possibly.
I'm trying to find like a time schedule to bring that show back, but sometimes it just takes so darn long. But anyways, I went to go install the Gen 2 system. I got it all properly configured, and then turned the computer off. Woke up the next day, turned it back on. No boot disk found. And I'm like, oh.
That's always bad.
Yeah. So we went straight into the troubleshooting. With first step being, did RAM go bad? Because, I've had that happen with RAM before. And when RAM goes bad, weird things happen.
Yeah.
And, it's also like an early generation DDR5 system with maybe not the EFI being like the most up to date. So maybe there's like some long-standing bug I haven't caught yet. So I went through swapping that around and still no boot disk found. I'm like, okay. Let's talk about the boot disk. Well, now I've got to completely tear apart the whole system just to replace a NVMe drive. Because that's what this is. It's an NVMe drive mounted underneath my GPU in my server rack mounted case that is not on the slide rails.
Oh, I'm so sorry. If it wasn't a slide rail, that would be nice.
It would be so much easier.
Pull it out. Open it up. And you're there.
I did some searching on the Amazon, and I spent $80. I'm going to get slide rails by Wednesday.
Nice.
So we're going to be doing this all over again. Well, anyways, I had to muscle this system out. It is roughly about like the top side of my shoulders. That's how high in the rack this system is mounted. So, of course, it was not the easiest thing to pull out either. In fact, it was a little bit awkward. When I was working on the initial troubleshooting, I was actually just climbing up a ladder, and I had the system above it actually pulled out because it's an open frame rack. I can get away with it. So, anyways, after I got it pulled out and tore into the system, I found out that it's a little dusty in there too. So I went to go clean it out and everything, and swapped out the drive for like a spare that I had. In fact, do I still have the dead one here somewhere? Well, either way, I had the dead one sitting on the desk somewhere, but then I guess I moved it.
How old it was?
Not even a year.
Oh.
Yeah, lighted. I cheaped out on this one, so I kind of figured that I was going to run into this eventually. Thankfully, I have a very aggressive backup policy. So, I didn't lose any data at all. Mostly because, it was a fresh distro installation, and I just haven't pulled from the backup yet anyway. So it's not like anything was really lost.
Yeah.
But I got the new disk installed into it. Well, now the system's not powering on. And like, oh no, what'd I do this time? Well, it turns out that when I was tearing my system apart, I have this wonderful little controller board that I can use for like this remote start system for my computer. So I don't have to get up off my butt and walk over to my server room to hit the power button on the PC.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, anyways, it turns out that when I was jiggling around the system, I damaged the board for that, and that sits on the power button header on the motherboard. So I had to tear that out. So I had to be like a caveman and actually hit the button on the computer now. I feel absolutely horrible about it.
Doesn't your computer have like turn on keyboard press button or setting in UEFI?
It does. However, I'm running over an extension cord.
Oh, so it's not
hub.
HID compliant transfer then?
Yeah.
Completely. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry.
The chain between keyboard and computer is not HID compliant.
Oh, so sorry.
Yeah. So that's something I need to work into the future. But, trying to find an HID compliant hub is actually almost impossible.
Interesting.
At least not a hub that you could fit like 10 devices on, because, that's how many devices have plugged into this one.
Yeah.
But anyways, now that Caveman mode has been activated, I went to, first of all, install like my general purpose, let's just see if things work distro. Debian. Because, if Debian doesn't work, then it probably, there's something wrong there. Because, glory to Debian, they call themselves the universal operating system for a reason. And generally, like when I'm experimenting with hardware, I at least boot up like the Debian installer just to see if it functions. So I plug it in, it works, it installs. I enable the backports kernel. I actually think I recorded a video about that at the time. Well, it turns out that when I pulled in the backports kernel, I also installed the v4L2 loopback module, because when we're recording the show, when Bigpod and I are recording the show, we use a video conferencing software, and we actually also use OBS to record. So I'm using OBS's virtual camera to show my video feed to Bigpod at the same time while we do the show, because I like to see Bigpod's face and he probably likes to see mine too. Yeah. But Linux has some camera issues that Pipewire is working on addressing, but it's still very much in the beta stages and not working so well yet.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah, it is getting better. It is getting better, I can tell you that much. But
yep.
Anyways, I pull down the kernel module from the backports repository. It works for a hot minute, and then it just suddenly starts panicking. And this is the kind of kernel panic where like your whole system freezes up, seemingly crashes, and then you just have nothing but just text spam going at 1,000 miles an hour across all your screens.
Welcome to Linux.
Yeah, welcome to Linux. So, okay. Obviously, there's issues with Debian. So, we go to our next fallback. Let's just install Fedora Silverblue, because I'm still wanting to see if I can make like Silverblue itself a daily driver for me. It's sort of there, sort of. But
maybe
anyways,
if you fixed your scripts, it would be.
Maybe. So I install Silverblue, and this is Silverblue 40, not 41, 40. They just came out with 41 not that long ago, like last week. And I immediately encountered the buggiest GNOME experience I've ever seen. I haven't seen like GNOME being this buggy since GNOME 3 came out. And the only bugginess with that GNOME was that it was slow. This one, I had screen tearing everywhere in a Wayland session of all places. Yeah. I had buttons where the highlight was basically in a gradient. a diagonal gradient. Yeah. And, I would sit there and, try to open up, like, say, a Flatpak running not quite the GTK 4, but still GTK 3. I would open that up and it would just send everything else in like a glitchy panic.
Wow.
Yeah, so
That's interesting.
it's like, okay, so we're on Silverblue. Let's rebase over to Kinoite, which is the KDE version. Just to see if KDE works. And you can just do that with these image-based distros. No need to reinstall, just rebase. So that's what I did. Well, KDE I think it was more of an SDDM issue, so no surprise there. But I went to go boot that, and I would see the grub prompt. I would see like the little fancy spinning icon that Fedora puts on there, and then it would just go to a black screen. And I couldn't switch TTYs, so my natural assumption is that the Wayland session is running. I can't SSH into the system because, SSH doesn't run by default.
Yep.
So, okay. Let's blow this system up. Let's grab a uBlue image because, I know great people that can support me with uBlue. I install uBlue. The installer works perfectly fine. I reboot the system, and guess what it didn't install?
I don't know. What? Apparently
it didn't install grub because there was no boot device found.
Interesting. Never thought it do that.
Yeah, so I went to the wonderful getfedora.com and I just grabbed a normal version of Fedora Workstation, installed that. We installed Fedora 40 because we're doing this in the name of stability. Well, Fedora 40 had the same graphical issues with GNOME that Silverblue had. Okay.
Apparently, maybe it's a bug or something that is in 40
it's a
repos.
bug that I encountered in Fedora 40. So I upgraded to Fedora 41. And I haven't had an issue yet.
So maybe
because I did that 10 minutes before we hit record.
So maybe you should install Silverblue 41.
Maybe I should install Silverblue 41, or maybe I just stop distro hopping and just stay on this system for a while because it's working.
Yeah, that's also an option, a really good one.
Yeah, surprisingly smart one at least. My question is, how long until I blow this system up and install Gentoo?
Short while.
Okay. Tell you what. Listeners, watchers, if you're watching us on the YouTube, leave a comment. If you're listening to us through the RSS feed, first of all, congratulations, you're listening to us in the preferred method for listening to the show. But you can also send us an email at this address that's showing up right now, contact@tuxbase.com. And you send an email saying that I assume that Josh will be installing Gentoo immediately after he stops recording.
Possible.
That's what you should put in the subject, and then in the body of the email, just actually put your prediction in there, or just call me a savage for blowing up systems, because that is a thing that I sometimes do.
That you are.
Yeah. Of course, if you're in the newer age, we have these links that are showing up here. These are our Fediverse addresses, where you can see an @username and then an @user address. You just put that into your threads or your Mastodon instance,
ActivityPub enabled system, so Federation enabled social media.
Which,
threads,
by the way, I found
Pleroma.
out that it also works through PeerTube.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. It actually is ActivityPub enabled. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you watch this from PeerTube somehow, which I don't think we sync to PeerTube instance, even though I know a friend I can talk to.
No, but maybe they could because of Castopod being on ActivityPub.
Maybe they could. They possibly could.
Yeah,
but
listen
anyways,
to us, not see us.
Yeah. of course, we do have our own individual YouTube channels. I don't know. Do we have a slide linking into YouTube channel?
No, not yet. Maybe we should create one.
Yeah, we should make one of those. Anyways, it'll show up on the screen here if we get one made in time. But, you know, we have our own YouTube channels. They're linked in the show notes. You can also... but, you know, if you just want to hang out with our community, we do have a Discord server as well. That's also linked. Or, you know, if you like to support our wild adventures, or at least my wild adventures and Bigpod's very stable adventures, where, you know, you just don't hear him talking about having all these issues.
He may be on the desktop very wild. I'm more wild on the server side, so it's a more expensive hobby, let's just say that.
Are you sure?
I am. I know I am.
Actually, I know you are. But anyways, if you'd like to support our adventures, you can send us a couple dollars from our Patreon, because, you know, we are doing this the hard way. Yeah. There is an easy way to do a podcast. That's called just publish to Spotify and Spotify only. We're doing this through setting up our server, hosting our own podcast platform, and telling Spotify, Apple, and all these other places to pull from us. We're doing this the hard way. And we're still a small show now, but only for now. Yes. And even though the average file size for our show is less than 50 megabytes, when, you know, you have thousands of people pulling in a show, that can equal to gigabytes or even terabytes of data transfer.
Yes.
And transfer is a very real potential cost for us in the future. Not necessarily storage, not necessarily compute, but the transfer is what's going to get expensive for us. Yeah. So I want to hedge our bets against that as soon as we possibly can.
And if you donate monthly, you also get access to a premium feed, which has much higher bitrate on audio.
And maybe some more cool things that we think of in the future, because, you know, that's about the only thing we could think of at the moment. Maybe some exclusive content, you know, like maybe Bigpod will just randomly record something and just post it to the feed, or, you know, maybe I'll do it. And then, you know, we could even do a very raw pre-show.
That would be interesting.
Ooh, that would be interesting, because, you know, we have some very interesting conversations sometimes before we actually, you know, hit the record button. What if we
including Bigpod accidentally going on a Slovenian rant without realizing he's talking Slovenian?
Yeah, you know, like Bigpod's reading an email from some other content creator from Slovenia, and he's just reading it to me. You're like, I don't know what you're saying, so I'm just going to continue looking at topics.
And Josh basically letting me rant in Slovenian without telling me I'm talking Slovenian.
Well, I don't want to interrupt you. That's just rude.
But before we go, we also have to tell you something. Those of you who listened to us last week already know, but if you're new in the listening, at the end of December, mid to end December, we're going to have a live show which will last at least a week, apparently.
At most a week, because I only have the week off.
Week-ish. Let's say week-ish.
Okay.
And you can affect the length by donating through Patreon during the stream, by subscribing, by liking, by engaging with the stream. We're gonna be doing things like playing games. We already have an idea about that, like things to do together, things to do apart. We're gonna record an episode live.
Maybe
we're gonna edit the episode live. And maybe we will even record videos for our own channels live.
Well, I've already got this massive document laid out here as to what I might potentially do here. You know, this is just a list of like headline topics. This isn't like everything in depth, but this is all bullet point ideas that I have. I also have
a list of topics to do if I can think of anything interesting.
Yeah, my big thing is I'm going to resume the Home Lab series because, you know, I'm done dealing with local issues. It's time for me to actually get back to what I wanted to do.
My thing will probably be the main thing, probably either playing with software, programming, or playing with server software because, well, that's my hobby.
That sort of sounds like a distro hacking episode. Maybe we should do that together.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And
Josh learns how to set up a Kubernetes cluster and decides that he's going to redeploy his entire network stack via Kubernetes.
yay. That would be an interesting thing.
That would be interesting. Of course.
But yeah, we're gonna do interesting things. Come join us. And maybe you can actually affect how long we will be going for.
Yeah, that said, we have figured out the logistics of how we're going to be doing the stream. And, of course, we're going to be sending the stream to our YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/@NoTuxAllowed.
So either subscribe to it now or bookmark it or open it in a new tab and wait for you to subscribe at the stream time. Choice is yours.
That's true. But either way, guys, that's going to be it for the show. So let's go. We'll go ahead and sign off here. In the meantime, I don't know if some of you video watchers have noticed the dog that walks around every now and then. I got a new puppy I got to go get back to potty training. So I'll see you later.
Goodbye.